Good morning. Are you feeling bored and disengaged? I can tell you that there have been periods in my life when bored and disengaged was what I got up to every day, and it really isn't a great way to start your day, your week, or your month. And today's guest on Nurturing Big Ideas Today Smart Conversations is someone who's going to talk to us about how she was feeling bored and disengaged, and she did something about it. So this is Yvonne, your Big Idea Facilitator, and I want to welcome Wendy Toth to Nurturing Big Ideas Today.
Morning, Yvonne. Thank you.
So Wendy's a longtime journalist, and she's a content creator. Wendy, when I see content creator, I actually do think of you, because I think that you were so good at the content that you helped create when you and I worked together, and the strategy behind it, and the way that you looked at what does this content mean and what is it going to do in the work that we're doing. So in the last couple of years has started a career coaching firm, and it's to help other creative women feel as fulfilled in their work as she does. I really like the way you say that, other creative women, because I like to tell women everywhere how creative they are, even if they don't think they are. Maybe you can, to start things off, give us a little bit of a background about how this new career coaching firm kind of crept up on you, and where BORED and DISENGAGED came in.
Oh, for sure. So, like you said, over the last 15 years, I've been a staffer at a bunch of different places: Parents Magazine, NBC, PetSmart, and I've written for a bunch of different places: the New York Times, and Everyday Health, and What to Expect, and Animal Planet. And it wasn't always like this for me. That's really exciting for me, doing all of those things. But when I first started out, I was in my 20s. I was living in New York City, and it was great. I had all these friends and roommates who were in bands and had these cool jobs. And New York is one of these places where I really feel like you have no excuse if you're not contributing to the culture in some way, because it's so crowded and rents are so expensive. And if someone's going to share a 3-floor walk up with you and share a bathroom, they expect you to be doing something really cool. So, I apologize. My pets are making noises.
That's okay.
So anyway, I was in New York working for a trade publication that no one ever heard of called Supermarket News. And
that's so fascinating. I mean, we'll talk more about it, but that is really fascinating. Continue.
It's a really cool magazine now, I know, looking back. But when I was working there, I'd be at these parties on roof decks with people, a band playing, and it would be midnight, and people would say, "What do you do?" And I'd be like, "Oh, I'm a reporter for this magazine, Supermarket News." And it sort of gave me this hunger to basically be published places that I could name drop in New York, which maybe isn't the best reason to want to do something, but I was in my early 20s and I really wanted to prove myself, and that's where my mind was. So I needed to figure out a way to get there, and being around all these other inspiring people made me really hungry to do that. So I was lucky. And what I ended up doing at that time was taking this class that's still being taught today by this great teacher, Susan Shapiro, and it's called Instant Gratification Takes Too Long. And it's a class on getting published.
How awesome is that? And so your writing teacher, Susan Shapiro, yes. Is she the one that's doing that class?
Yep, she teaches it to this day, and she's got a number of books under her belt and a ton of articles, and she's this rainmaker. And I really learned from her to come from a place of sharing with other people, giving other people opportunities, not feeling like you have to steal writing opportunities from others. Really, that the more you share, the more opportunities come to you. And the way she runs her class is so smart. She has former students who have gotten great editing jobs come back and talk to her classes. And then she gives you their email address. And then you suddenly have this in with an editor where you can say, hey, saw you speak in Sue's class. I have a pitch idea. And she just keeps this cycle going. I've gone back multiple times to her class to speak and hired multiple writers that are her students. And it's a wonderful, just growing community that she's created. So that was really where I learned, kind of what's at the core of my philosophy.
In New York City still?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. I mean, my granddaughter's in New York City right now, and I kind of cringe because I'm more of an introvert that I just like to stay home in my little comfortable place where I know how to get from room to room and who I'm going to find when I get in the other room. And so I don't venture out a lot. So I give people a lot of credit when they do that. And I think that from what I know of you, and when we worked together back in Blog Pause, people hear me say Blog Pause a lot because I met so many fascinating people like you, having met people at that class. Blog Pause introduced me to so many wonderful, creative women like yourself that I say that's where all of this started. But the reality is that we women, sometimes women are like me and they kind of don't want to venture out, and I keep telling them, yes, take some baby steps, get out there, meet people, even if it's just locally. And then I see women like you who have just blossomed, and I think it's partly because you took that step to go there. You recognized this. To me, hi, Kitty. I like puppies. But you recognize that you wanted to be more than just whatever. And I don't want to make it sound like women have to be more of anything. I want it to sound like, what's in your soul and in your heart. And then I'm fascinated by Supermarket News. I'm fascinated by this magazine that I don't think anyone's ever heard of. And you say you didn't think it was any big deal, but apparently a lot of people read it.
The best thing about this story is years later, right? It's 15 years down the road, and I took this class, really got a lot of clips in a lot of other publications that afforded me kind of an in to work full time at those places I could name drop, like NBC, which was great. So years go by, and I'm kind of working my way up to the point where we met, and I'm a director now, and I'm deciding content strategy for a big company like PetSmart, and I'm meeting with all these advertising executives all the time because they're going to buy ads on a website that I'm running, and we have these big strategy meetings. They want to know what kind of content we're going to publish. And a lot of times they would want to know my background. And I would always mention Supermarket News because that's how I got my start. I start finding out over the years, a lot of these executives at these big companies used to be buyers at supermarkets. They bought the pet food for Kroger or Walmart or Piggly Wiggly and read Supermarket News. It's an industry trade publication. So suddenly it's like, oh, I recognize your name. I can't believe you wrote for them. And it honestly became this thing where that Supermarket News became what I was name dropping later in my life. I didn't appreciate it when I was in my 20s because I didn't think it was cool. And then now I look back and I'm like, that I learned a ton there, and it's really done a lot for me further down in my career because now all these people think, okay, she at least understands what my challenges are.
Yeah. So you're looking at mid-career women. Mm-hmm. Women that, you're using words like bored and disengaged, which I really like because they're really powerful words that women can relate to. We do often feel that way. But why use it that way? What is I decided I'm going to have this career coaching company because, not just because you're smart and talented and you want to share, which is what you just kind of shared a little bit with us, but why the mid-career women?
I feel like mid-career women are the most at risk. I like to say that when you're bored or you're disengaged at work, it's an emergency, but you don't realize it. And when you hate your job, you know it's an emergency and you are motivated to move your behind to get out of there. But when you're mid-career and you're making a good salary and things are okay, but you're feeling kind of unfulfilled, that's where I really feel like those women are the most at risk, because if they don't make a move, it's like that old story about putting a frog in warm water and then slowly turning up the heat. 5-10 years down the road, they're at risk for anxiety, depression, other bigger issues, and they don't even know at that point where it's coming from. And then it's a much bigger emergency. So I like to kind of catch people when these feelings are starting to creep up on them, but they still have the motivation and the energy to make a move before they really get into that kind of like emotional trouble. And I think it's happened to me. It's happened to a lot of my friends. If you're not being very intentional about your career, it can creep up on anybody.
Yeah. So do you find that the women you talk to and the women that you meet with and work with, do you find that they don't take that step because they don't know what to do next, or they're confused about, hey, the world said I was supposed to get this job and work for 25 years and retire, but now that I realize I don't want to, what do I do?
Yeah, I find two common scenarios. One is I know exactly what I want. I want to be a VP at X company. I don't know how to get there. And the other is I'm 45 years old and I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. So they're different, but I feel like both situations can benefit from going through similar exercises.
Yeah. That's interesting. I kind of deal with the women who don't want any other like 9-to-5 job or something, but now that you mention it, sadly, I do forget the women who want that like corner office or have the ambition. And there's nothing wrong with it. I think it's wonderful. I would not be someone for them to talk to. I think you, with your background, would be much better on that. So talk a little bit about how this kind of crept up on you, number one. We mentioned that earlier, but how are you, what kind of strategy are you thinking for your career coaching firm?
Sure. So I feel like I'm very passionate about this niche, I think, because somewhere along the way I got really into Tim Ferriss. And Yvonne, he doesn't speak to us. He's this bro from Long Island. He's great, has great advice on business and life, but he doesn't speak to women. That being said, so I always tell people, like, take him with a grain of salt, but listen to what he says. So I got really into his book and his podcast, and one of the things that he said was, when people are asking you to do something, that's a sign. Like, if you want to start a business, think about the things that people repeatedly ask you to do. So over the years, I think growing in my career and managing teams, I was still writing and doing content strategy, which I still do today and I still love. I think I'm never going to outgrow loving writing. But what did start to happen, and this is another thing that's natural that I think a lot of people either like feel bad about when their interests change, was I started to really love mentoring and coaching my team members and mapping out career strategies for them and helping them get promoted or switch to a different department or, double down on their strengths. And as that grew, then my friends would start calling me and asking me for career advice, and then friends of friends. And when it got to that point where it was people I didn't know that well, I was like, maybe I should turn this into a business.
Maybe the universe is telling you something.
Yes. And, I ended up hiring, this is very meta, a small business coach to help me set my business up. And she's great. And something she said was like, if you're not out there marketing this talent, you're basically being selfish, which I never thought about. And I really like that.
Well, that relates to what we used to tell the bloggers at Blog Pause. When we first started Blog Pause, all the bloggers were passionate about shelters and rescues, and they had a favorite shelter that they worked with or volunteered at, and they felt when we would tell them they had to charge for their talent, they had to get paid if they were going to work with certain brands or whatever. And they would say, but that's kind of icky. I didn't start my blog to be a business and get paid. And we'd say, you're being awful selfish, because if you're not getting paid, you're not contributing to that shelter that you want to contribute to. Imagine what you could do for that shelter if you were getting paid. And suddenly they thought, oh, well, maybe that's okay. So that's a stumbling block some women especially have to get over. I love that you talked about Tim Ferriss, because I tend to not anymore, used to read men, because not that they aren't good, not that they don't have, I mean, there are dozens out there that are just fabulous, and yes, they come across my desk, but I feel like when I see something about the target market and all these war analogies and all these things that are not relevant to me as a woman, I'm like, please, let me go somewhere else. Excuse me. And that's why I try to get women to write books, because I want women up and coming, the women that you work with, the women that I want there to be content out there written by other women that they can access. So when you write your book, you're someone I want to be able to quote. I really feel as if we women need to be proud and get that advice out there when we're able to give it. And then, as you are, be open to advice from others. I mean, don't you learn every day from other people?
So much. And I think you hit the nail on the head. A problem I see a lot, both with women wanting to do something like write a book or start a business or change jobs, is that fear of not being liked. And I don't know if it's universal, but it does seem to be a little bit less of a concern with men.
Yep.
You know, who knows? We could point to a million reasons in society or the way we're raised or what we're told. But that's something that I'm really trying to help everybody I work with and myself work through, is like, okay, it's fine if a few people don't like you, and just moving on. It's not a big deal. But I think, crazily enough, that it's like a psychological block. It takes a lot to get over that, but it's totally fine. Once it happens a couple of times, I think then everybody gets over it fast. And I'm sure, like with blog posts and blogging, that's another issue, right? Because you're putting yourself out there, you're opening yourself up to comments, you're on, up on social media, which we know can be the best and the worst of humanity. So just kind of like working your way through that. And then once you get on the other side, all these opportunities open up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Wendy, this has been absolutely fabulous. I really feel like the bored and disengaged that you sent me, those words were the words that you used. And I feel strongly that that's exactly how some women feel, but they don't know it, like you said. And mid-career is a great time for them to connect with you so they can kind of be guided along where they need to go next. So from Smart Conversations and Nurturing Big Ideas today, this is Yvonne DeVita. Thank you, Wendy, so much. And I hope we can do this again, like in 6 months or so.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.